Hello, I'm Jack Brown. I'm here with my dad, John P. Brown, and we're going to be giving an interview today. It's an interview being conducted for the Legal History Project of the Tennessee Bar Foundation, and today is July 8th, 2021, and we are also joined by my youngest son, Isaac Brown, and my wife, Cindy Chappell, is also here. So you're John Polk Brown Jr., correct?
I am.
Okay, and what day were you born?
January 6th of 42.
1942, and you were telling me earlier about a story of the day you were born. Do you remember that? About the hearse?
Yeah, it was a bad weather out. I mean, ice everywhere. You couldn't get anywhere. Well, my daddy couldn't get a car that would get my mother to the hospital. So he called his friend, who was in the ambulance business.
Bracy.
Bracy, yeah. What's Bracy's last name? Anyway, Bracy, he called Bracy and told him to come out there with the ambulance. And so they got out there, and my daddy, being as courteous man he was, he said to my mother, up in the front seat with Bracy, the driver, and he got in the back and laid out and went to sleep on the sofa in the back end. And off they went, which was fine, except before they got to the hospital, they stopped at a restaurant out there, one of those places, And Bracy and my mother went in to get something to eat before they went on to the hospital. And then later, he got up, my daddy woke up, and he realized he's the only one in there. So he raised up in the ambulance. And, of course, by now some people have gotten around looking in, seeing what's going on. They see him rise up and climb out of there and go into the restaurant, And it caused a little excitement, I think is the legal term for it.
And so your mother was Hazel Spillers, was her maiden name?
That was.
And was she from Nashville too?
Yes.
And her dad, I believe, was a home builder.
That's correct.
And built some homes here in Nashville.
That's correct.
And do you remember where she went to high school?
I am not sure.
I think it was East.
I guess she went to East High School. My dad went to downtown at
Hume Fogg.
Hume Fogg, yes.
Okay. And so, is your family originally from Nashville? I mean, how many generations does it go back?
Back that far, I don't know if any before that or not.
Okay. So JP was your dad. He went by JP.
Right.
He was John P. Brown Sr. I'm John P. Brown III. And
yeah.
So, he graduated from Hume Fogg, and his parents were Mommy and Pappy Brown.
That's correct.
Which would be Theona Patty Brown and Aaron Burr Brown Sr.
That's correct.
Okay. And then Hazel, your mom's mom, was named Moy.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay. And y'all lived in East Nashville when you were born?
That's correct.
I believe it was South 11th? Or
South 11th. Well, we lived several different places, but when I was actually born, we were living at South 11th.
Okay. And then where did y'all move from there? Or where'd you?
Probably we moved from there out towards Madison, and on. I'm embarrassed to tell you, I can't name the name of that street, but it.
Okay. But eventually, they lived on Pleasant Valley,
Right.
Which is near the intersection of Franklin Road and Woodmont Boulevard, or.
Right. Yes.
And so you told me that your best childhood friend was Terry Comer. Your first cousin was one of your best friends.
Well, that's two different people.
Terry Comer.
Terry Comer, it was probably my closest friend. He was But he lived in New York, not in New York, in Washington, D.C. area.
Okay.
His father died, and then his mother married a friend who was actually his father's friend also. And they moved to, they had to move up there.
That was Uncle Frank. He was a spy. We never really knew what he did,
Right.
but he worked for the...
You can't say he was a spy, but that's what he was.
And that was Harriet, Hazel's sister.
Right.
And she had another sister, Genna, and then a brother, Jay.
That's correct.
And I think Jay died before I was born, but I certainly knew Harriet and Genna.
Yeah.
And Genna had a big family. How many children did she have?
Seemed like she had 8.
7 or 8?
Could have been more than that. I don't know. I wouldn't think it was any less than that.
Okay. And then your dad had 2 brothers, Uncle Billy,
Right.
William O. Brown,
Right.
W.O., and then your Uncle Aaron Brown,
Right.
and he was married to Ruth Dale Brown,
That's correct.
and they had 5 boys.
Right.
And then how many brothers did you have?
3. How many do you think I had?
3.
I got it right.
And that you were the oldest of the 4, right?
Uh-huh.
And then Tom.
John, Tom, Lebo, and Philip.
Okay. And Lebo and Philip, Tom is now deceased, but Lebo and Philip both live here in Nashville now.
That's true, yes.
And so you told me earlier that your 3 schools here in Nashville you went to were Burton School, and then after y'all moved out to Pleasant Valley, you went to Glendale, where both of my sons went also, and then you attended Hillsborough High School. And you told me one of your best friends growing up was
About Sam Harris.
Sam Harris.
Yeah, he lived right behind me if you know where my grandmother lived, down.
On Pleasant Valley?
She lived on Pleasant Valley, and his house was right directly behind that.
Okay. And then it was sometime before you started at Hillsborough, or about the time you started at Hillsborough, you also started attending Calvary United Methodist Church.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure when that started, but it was, we'd gone to East End forever, and then we got on up and decided to start to go to that church.
Okay, and that's about the time that you started dating my mother, Lowland Wamser.
Some along there.
And is it true that they called her Swampy?
Well, I certainly wouldn't have used that name, but she was well known as Swampy.
And that's because of her first name was Lowland, and the Lowlands are the...
made it Swampy, so
Yeah.
wasn't anything I ever said about her.
And so then from there, you went to, you graduated Hillsborough, I believe, in 68 or thereabouts.
Seemed like it was way before.
I'm sorry, it's
I thought
1960.
Yeah, I would believe 60.
And then do you remember where you went to college?
Yeah, I went up to Murfreesboro, whatever that's called back then. It was funny because it was depending on when I graduated from high school, from college, and how soon I got into college, told me when I could get out. And so I rushed around there and did whatever. And I know that I almost skipped graduation at Hillsborough, but I didn't. I finished up all my classes, and then I went up and signed up in Murfreesboro.
At Middle Tennessee State.
Middle Tennessee, and did whatever I had to do so that I started getting classes, and it made me get out of school a year sooner than I would have otherwise.
Okay. And then from there, you went to UT Memphis
Yes,
and studied pharmacy?
yes, that's correct.
Okay, and your dad was a pharmacist
Yes.
also, and he started J.P. Brown drugstores,
That's correct.
and I think you told me that was about 1959 or so? Does that sound about right?
Late 50s, I don't know,
Okay.
but, close there.
And the initial store was on Gallatin Road
Uh-huh,
near East High School?
yeah, 901, yes. He was diagonally across the street from East End,
Okay.
or from high school, whatever you said it was.
And your dad's nickname was the Founder because he started the drugstores.
I guess that's why, yeah.
But he went by or people call him
They
the
called him
Founder.
the Founder, yeah.
And so, I guess my mom went to Memphis State, and then y'all got married sometime. Is that in college or right after college?
I think we may have gotten married before college.
I think it was before the end of college, but
Maybe before that, yeah, before then. It was, I don't think we knew we were going to be getting married, if you just wanted to know. And nobody's told this story much. But her mother ran into my mother at the grocery store and says, "We got to do something about these." She's changed school. She's now going to school in Memphis. He's in school in Memphis, and no adults to watch over them, and one thing and another, and I think they just need to get married. And, my mother's saying, "Well, think they ain't gonna have anything to say about this?" And she said, "Well, no. What do you mean? Why would they? They're just kids. Why should they have anything to say for it?" And suffice it to say, we later got married within a year or two, and lived together in Murphy, within about a block of where I was going to school. Anyway, we got married. One of us lived out by the school out on the west side of town, and then I went downtown where I was going, and
Okay.
rode the bus back and forth.
But you ended up graduating from UT Memphis and then came back to Nashville, and my mom graduated from Memphis State,
Yeah.
and then y'all moved back here,
Right,
and y'all, I believe you lived on Castleman Court near Green Hills,
right.
and that's where you had your first child, Joan, my sister, Joan
Right.
Patience,
Right, you remember her.
and she was born in August of 64, and I was born in December of 1966.
You have to ask somebody
Okay.
who was there.
And about that time is when you decided to go to what was then known as the YMCA Night Law School.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, I had wanted to be a lawyer, and I finally decided that if I was going to be a lawyer, I had to get a law license.
Okay.
So that's when I started.
And I think you told me your dad had wanted to be a lawyer.
He'd always wanted to be one, and he couldn't. He's working too. He was supporting himself and his wife and by then 2 children, I guess. And so.
So you were going to night law school at the Y,
Right.
and also you were running a drugstore in Green Hills, J.P. Brown Drugstore on Hillsborough Road.
Yeah, I don't know how soon after that. When I got my license, and that, I was working in drugstores, and needing every nickel to have, and so they would call me when somebody needed to be off. They'd always call me because I always came, and that's the way I did for several years.
Right. So you supported your family as a pharmacist a lot of the time, and
Right.
while you were going to night law school, and then ultimately you graduated from law school in approximately 1968 or 69. Does that sound about right?
I have no idea. It was back there somewhere.
Okay. But then you turned your your drugstore that was in Green Hills across from Calvary Methodist Church, you turned it into your law office.
Right.
And you remember your law partner's name?
You,
John Camp.
John Camp, yeah, okay. Yeah, John and I had talked about, when we were going to law school at night, we had talked about getting together, practicing together. And he was going to have to go back up into East Tennessee to practice. And he didn't want to do that. And I talked him into, settling down and going to school going in with me, which he did. And then that didn't work out too well because his grandfather or somebody up in East Tennessee died. And, they wanted him to come and run that family business. And, it was more money than God as far as we could tell. And so he had to take that. And
So he moved back to, I believe it was Sparta,
yeah,
Tennessee.
that's right.
And then you also practiced, one of your lawyer buddies was Bobo Bradshaw.
Yeah, he never did practice with me, but he used to live there some and visit. He dated a girl down here, and he would come down and spend the night in my office. And we had it set up, and I don't know why exactly, but it was a smart thing to do. We had a shower built into the office. And so he could come and spend the night and take a shower and do all that sort of thing. And it worked out pretty well.
And so you practiced law basically in Green Hills, your whole private practice.
Yeah.
And what kind of cases did you do?
Anything that would come in the door.
With money?
Yeah, with money. I mean, I didn't know how to do anything that didn't pay.
So I think you did some divorces and family law, and you also did some criminal law.
Uh-huh.
We were talking last night, and I remember you always had a beard when I was growing up, and then one day I came home and you had shaved your beard, and it was just shocking because you didn't have a beard, and it was because you had a jury trial, a murder jury trial.
The next day. I had to shave my beard off.
So I do remember that. And then at some point, I know you ran for the state legislature in the late 70s or mid 70s, maybe early 70s.
I don't know when it was, but yes.
Okay. And then how did you make up your mind, or what made you decide that you wanted to be a judge?
They got paid every month. If you just want to know the truth.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that. You were, I know Harlan Dotson was helping you when you were running for judge.
Yes.
And Larry Harrington.
Right.
And you initially ran in 1980, I believe. And let me know if I'm remembering this right. It was you and Leon Rubin, and then Bob Sutton pushed the button for Sutton. Remember that?
I do.
And Bob Sutton won that race, and then he got beat 2 years later by Barbara Haynes, I believe.
Right.
And then you and Leon Rubin were then elected in 1982 at the same time. And y'all served together for
a long time.
Yeah. So one thing I want you to tell us about is the goat roast.
Okay.
Did you and Harlan come up with that idea, or?
Yeah, I don't know who came up with the name of it, but it was his idea to have a big, boat. What was it?
The goat roast?
Goat roast, yeah. And anyway, we came up with that, and it was Harlan's idea. Harlan was sort of my brains at that time. I met him when we took the review to take the exam together. We went up to Knoxville, and stayed for about 2 months taking the course before we took the exam. And I remember my friend Camp pointed it out to me. I said, "That was up there. No, I didn't know who he was. You don't know who that is? No, who is it? Is it Jesus? And it was Harlan. I mean, he was a well-known lawyer, and he had no idea of studying for the thing. But his daddy was a lawyer, and his daddy said, "You're going up to to Knoxville, and you're going to study hard, and you better not do anything but pass it with good grades." So he did, and he sat up there the whole time, and he flicked. He'd have a roll of paper, and he'd shoot it back and forth with his fingers like that. And everybody else was just doing this, watching him. And of course the teachers thought that was disrespectful. But
So did you pass the bar the first time?
certainly.
And then, so back to your running for judge. I remember when you first ran in 1980, your sign said John Brown for full-time judge. And
Okay.
and then when you got beat, we joked after that the public didn't want a full-time judge. So, but in 1982, I guess you ran again, and you had 3 opponents, and that was your first time to win.
There's
That's-
something to be said for being 1 out of 4 that had run before and was well known.
Right, you'd run 2 years earlier, so your name was kind of out there. And so about that time, who else was a general sessions judge back then?
Oh, a lot of them.
We mentioned Barbara Haynes,
Yeah, she came along,
and then
and we didn't think much of her. I mean, she was a woman. They figured that out pretty quick that she was a woman, so we didn't take her to be very serious till we got running and we found out how serious she was. She was tough, and it came down to it that she and I would talk and decide how we were going to do this, that, and the other. Make sure we didn't run against each other and that kind of thing. And a lot of it paid off.
so some other, I guess when you were initially elected, it was Big Gail, and then Gail Robinson,
Yeah.
and then Little Gail, or Gail Robinson Jr., he came along later and was a judge with you.
Yeah.
Also Judge Higgins, Judge Rubin, Judge Feynman,
Yeah.
all of them. Judge John Aaron Holt was a judge, a friend of yours.
Well, I mean, once you got elected and we're working together side by side every day, you either got to be real good friends or not very good friends. And usually it was good friends. I can tell you a story about Higgins. Now, who were we talking about back there?
Which one?
About 3 names back.
Gail Robinson?
Now, somebody in his office, though. I can't remember who it was. Howard, I got to tell you. Well, let me just tell it, and somebody will figure out who it was. Anyway, he had, back then you were in the courthouse, didn't have the new building, we were all in the courthouse. And you had to take people going through their before they did all their work to get out. They were meeting with the probation officer, and then you had to leave and go walk through the courtroom and to leave the courthouse. And of course, there was no such thing as smoking in that courtroom, none. And so if a chance had a chance to lay out on somebody, they would do it. So somebody tipped me off that Gail he was back smoking in the.
Is this Gail Senior or Gail Junior?
Must have been junior. Senior would have known better. Anyway, so they said he did. Of course, we knew because we told our people at work back there, you can't smoke in here. So Gail got ready to leave, and he said, "Where'd I put out my cigarette?" And he says, "I don't know." what do you mean? How'd it get in here? And he says, you can't put it out in here. So, and it already tipped me out, So he came out and he had his smoke in his hand and kind of slipping it out like pretty fast through there,
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, I knew he was coming. It'd been tipped off, so I didn't say anything. I just let him get through there. And his office was down from the courthouse about 3 blocks, where the same people are still in that office. And so, and of course, I let him get down there and settle in for me. And by then, the word was getting all over the courthouse what had happened. So I called down there and said I'd have my secretary called, telling me I need to see him in the courthouse, in the bench, And whoever answered the call, and I said, well, I'm sorry, he's in the office with his client. And whoever called said, well, would you tell him that this is Judge Brown, and he'd like to see him in court just as soon as he could work it out to get up here. He is standing here waiting for him. Left a pretty fine thing. And by now it spread all over the courthouse. So he came in, and he knew something bad had happened, because when he gets off the elevator, everybody's lined up watching him. He walked in, and then they all follow in, and he's there. And I just, as politely as I could, ate him out about it. Were you smoking in my courtroom? I was told that you smoked, carrying it out in your hand, smoke in my court. Just giving it to him. And yes, Judge, yes, Judge, yes, Judge. I mean, he just, and anyway, that went on. And then finally, there was probably 100 people had come in behind him that he never sees. Saw him come in. And then when they started laughing out loud and he turned around, then he knew he was just hung,
Right.
So anyway, we let him go after that. But that was a big story at the time.
So, you were elected to a total of 3 terms, 3 8-year terms, 82 and then 90 and then 98.
Okay.
And served a total of 24 years in Division 5 of the General Sessions Court, right?
If you say so.
And that was the Judge Wyatt had served in that court before you.
Right.
And then he went up to criminal court, and
Right.
and you ran for his empty
And
seat.
of course, I did what you didn't dare want to run against anybody that was serving and doing a good job. You didn't do that. So I went to see him real early to make sure that he was going to run. He was moving and running up in criminal court. And I just said, I've got to start my campaigning, but I just want you to know I'm announcing for your spot. But if you decide that you've told me you're not going to run for that spot again, but if you decide to, I will not run against you, And he thanked me for that and so forth. But that's the way you did it.
And he was elected to criminal court and served
Yeah.
3 or more terms
For
there.
a good while.
And so back to the goat roast, y'all came up with it. I think it was in part because back in those times you had Fate Thomas had the Sure Shot Rabbit Supper.
Right.
And y'all were trying to come up with some political thing to rival that, and so y'all came up with the goat roast.
We did.
And I remember the first one was at our house on Hampton Avenue,
Yeah.
and in the back of the house, and
It was.
Al Gore Jr. was at the original goat roast. I remember
Yeah.
that. Vice President Gore, and so. Anyway, the goat roast was a big success. You had multiple,
Yeah, we had them every year for several years,
especially around election time, I know.
Yeah.
And so, so tell us what the General Sessions Court is, or tell us about that.
Well, it took a across-the-board thing of everything from criminal cases to civil cases to everything else, just whatever it came along. and you had a group of judges, and they sort of spread it around. In other words, this week you might be doing criminal cases, next week doing civil cases, and the week after that doing something else. And, it worked out pretty good.
And y'all would rotate around to a different courtroom each
Yes,
week?
Yes, you would be in courtroom one doing this and that, and next week you'd be somewhere else. And it was not as good because the top line judges would have they would have their courtroom, and their office would be right behind it. So when it came time for them to go to court, they would just get up and go in from their office to that, and it was real nice. Whereas with the general sessions, you might have to go down to a different floor or whatever,
Or even a different building?
Yeah, sometimes in a different building, and so it was not nearly as nice as the others.
But your office was on the third floor of the courthouse, I believe. 301 Metro Courthouse was your...
That was at one time, for a long time, that's where it was.
Yeah.
Yes.
So y'all would handle misdemeanor cases or whatever, and then would also have preliminary hearings for larger cases.
Right.
In criminal court. And civil, you just had basically small claims court and landlord-tenant matters and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and a lot of it was just, you came in, you heard it, and you ruled it, and everybody didn't like it, went somewhere else and, appealed it.
They would have direct appeal to the circuit court if they
Right.
didn't like this. So, and you also did the Middle Tennessee Mental Health,
Right.
the emergency committal docket.
Right, and we'd have to go out there to the mental health hospital, and, in Nashville, it was out almost into Williamson County. Anyway, you went out there to do that, and then only in the last year or two are they doing it by, like we're doing today.
Like Zoom or
Zoom, yeah.
teleconference.
You could do it from there. In fact, they weren't doing it that way by the time I retired from it, till I came back and was filling in some, and then I'd have to learn to do that way.
Okay, so after you retired, I wanted to stop at 1 second and tell one story on you. Gary Temple, I was talking to him. He's an attorney here in Nashville, and he was telling me his favorite Judge Brown story was that one day he was in there and you were having a preliminary hearing on a criminal matter, and you'd been sitting up there listening to it for a while, and at some point you turned your chair around and kind of fell asleep on the up there, and the DA or the public defender, I guess you bound the person over like they always do in general sessions, but the public defender was like, "Judge, how could you rule on it? You were asleep the last, you didn't hear all my proof." And you said, "Well, I made up my mind before I fell asleep." So I wanted to tell that one on you. So you served a total of 24 years, and how long did you practice law? I guess from 68 or 70 to 82, you practiced in Green Hills, and then once you became judge, of course, you closed down your law practice.
That's right.
Do you remember any of your clients or anything like that? Any stories?
I'm sure I ought to. Have you got anything that I might remember that you tickle my mind?
Well, when you first started practicing law, I guess it was right during the civil rights movement.
Uh-huh.
And I guess John F. Kennedy was killed at some point, and you told me that you remembered the night that Bobby Kennedy was killed.
I still remember it.
And what do you remember about that?
Well, the main thing I remember is he was in California, and I was sitting up at home watching him speak out there, and I was sure my daddy was at home watching, but I wasn't positive. When he got shot, I called my daddy, and we both just cried like babies. But, that was the main thing I remembered about that. And I remember this guy, humongous guy, piled on whoever had shot him and was laying on him and just holding him down, and wouldn't let him shoot him. They got him out, got him in trouble.
So that was a scary time, I guess.
It was.
So you're a lifelong Democrat, right?
So far.
And your dad was a Democrat.
Yeah.
And I remember you told me that, I remember in 1976 when Jimmy Carter was elected president, we went to the inauguration in D.C. and you and my mom went to some inaugural balls, but we went to the parade and saw the inauguration. And then I believe you were appointed to the President Carter's Small Business Council or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And because all this time while you were a judge or practicing law, you also had the drugstores that you were working part-time in or helping run or manage, right?
Right.
And y'all had stores all over town, I guess.
Yeah, pretty much.
We said that Gallatin Road was the initial one, but you also had J.P. Brown drugstores on Murfreesboro Road and Noblesville Road. Went out on Charlotte Pike in West Nashville. The Green Hill store. The Melrose store, which is the one your dad primarily worked on across from the Melrose Theater, kind of.
Yeah.
And then Dickerson Road is one that you worked at a lot, too. And then you later had a second one on Dickerson Road on out a little bit further. But
yeah, we bought a second one, and we had both of them for several years, and then ended up moving together.
And at some point, I believe it was around the early 90s, y'all ultimately sold the drugstores to, I believe, Revco. And then Revco sold out to CVS later on.
I'm not sure how it exactly went like that, but yes, it all happened at the same time, and so it made it a better deal for the people to buy it when they were buying just ours. They also bought a bunch of others, So.
Yeah, and I remember when I was little, you were always proud of the fact that J.P. Brown Drugstore was one of the only independently owned drugstores that were able to compete with the big Walgreens and all those folks at that time.
Well, at that time, that was true,
So the only other time I remember you having an opponent when you ran for judge was you were running against a guy named, I think his name was Greg Galloway. And I don't know if you remember this, but he had yard signs that said, "Stop crime, vote Galloway." And I remember you saying, well, if he's going to stop crime, then I'm going to vote for him.
I don't remember him stopping it.
So other places you lived in Nashville, you lived on Castleman Court when I was born, and then we lived out on Timberwood Drive.
Right.
And then we lived on Hampton Avenue when I was in high school. And then you also lived in Hampton Place.
Yeah.
And at some point in or around 1985 or 86, you started dating Ann Drury at the time.
Yeah.
And y'all were married, I believe, in February of 1987.
Sounds about right.
All right. And you're still married to Ann.
Mm-hmm.
And so she has two sons also, Matt and Kevin. And Y'all lived in Hampton Place, and then y'all built a home out in the ends of Granny White,
Yeah.
way up on the hill.
Right.
Remember that?
I do indeed.
And that was a beautiful home with windows and balconies, and you could see all the way to downtown.
Right.
And we used to watch the fireworks up there and all kinds of stuff. And then y'all moved, I believe y'all bought Judge Kip Gaden's family home or whatever off of Franklin
Yeah.
Road.
It was, y'all know, we liked that house. My wife really liked it. And when it came up for sale, I remember I went to talk to Kip about it. And I says, your house is going to be for sale. And I didn't want to try to take it away from you if you were interested in it. But if you're not interested in it, then I'm going to buy it because my wife really loves it. He said, no, we don't, we're done with it. And says, wish you well with it. And so we bought it and stayed in it for a number of years.
And now you live on Wellington Park
Right.
off of Harding Place near the intersection of Hillsborough Road and Harding Place.
Right. That's it.
So what do you remember about being a member of the Nashville Bar Association?
Well, I know I've always been a member, since I started practicing. And, they've always helped me. And I think they help all the lawyers in doing the right things.
I think you told me about going to the annual picnic every year.
Used to, yeah. Yeah, that was quite a thing. It was usually it was a football game. I mean, what do you call those? Where you hit
Golf.
a golf ball. It was always a golf thing, and not being much of a golf player, I didn't know which end to hit. But anyway, you always went because everybody had a little social period too, and it's general thing. They didn't let the limit in them more and more. They had woman limit, and they sort of had to start letting women in.
So when you do you remember how many women were in your law school class?
I think there was one at the beginning, and then it got to be a couple of more, but that was about it. I mean, you just didn't have none of them women around.
Well, I know you were a mentor in part to Sue Evans, who ultimately became a judge. I think she worked in your law office, and
She worked in my law office and worked hard, and then wanted to get to be a judge. And, and she was a great judge when she got to be a judge. She just worked her way on up, and when she started out in my office, she couldn't do it. She couldn't be a person. She was just sort of like a clerk or something. But she would do all the work and then go out here, and I'd go to court for it, and do it. But she was great. And I had several others. I had another one that was the same way that lived up north. And she was down here, and her boyfriend was taking something in Nashville. And so she had to stay another year, but she had, between the two of them, they were both way smarter than I was.
is that Sarah Pettit was your secretary?
Yeah, she was another one. But between the three of them, they got everything ready, and then they would send me to court. And if it had any sense and it was any serious case, one of them would go around and go with me and say, now, this and that and the other. And I'd stand up and be the the man that speaks, and we did very well.
Another woman I think you helped mentor was Gail Ray when she was running for sheriff.
I did. And, never had so sorry about that either.
And so I know that a couple of aside stories, I know that you and Ann traveled to all of Matt Drury's, he played football at Dartmouth.
Right.
And y'all went to all his games. And
Drove generally back and forth to,
And then I want to I know you're a big Willie Nelson groupie, or
Well, a fan, certainly.
and how did that come about? Or
Well, I just, was interested in, and he was, he had friends, a lot of his folks lived here, and so I'd gotten to know them, and,
members of his band? I think
Yeah.
you mentioned Grady Martin and Mickey Raphael.
yeah, they both lived here, and I ended up, getting to know them, through the years and helping them with their problems, and, and they would always, if I wanted to go to the show, I could always get backstage, and so I took advantage of that. And then as it went from there, it went on. And his sister, which was
Bobby.
baby sister Bobby, which was actually about 15 years older than him, but she was known as Bobby's sister. And, I got to know her real well. And she would, when she came to Nashville, of course, Willie, when he came to Nashville, which was a lot, and the whole band would have to, or the ones that rode his bus anyway, would have to stay over because he would be cutting music for whatever. And I'd always call Bobby and take her out to dinner, and, my wife and I would take her to dinner, and this and that and the other. And so we got to know them all good.
So you got to be closer and closer friends with Willie and family. Were you part of the family?
Well, I'd like to think so.
And you've been to the Willie Nelson's 4th of July picnic, I guess, many times.
I have several times.
And at some point, Willie started inviting you on stage.
Yeah, he's done that a lot of times, especially in Nashville. When he plays in Nashville, he always lets me open the shows or whatever, And then, in other places, I'm not nearly as famous as I am in Nashville. But when I'm in Nashville, the crowds love me.
And so it's a little ironic that you sang backup singer on like the only instrumental song in the show, as I recall it.
What was that now?
The song you always came out and sang, it was just the end of a long instrumental song, and you came out and
sang it.
sang la 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 at the end of it.
I knew all the words. That's
Yeah.
why I got to sing it.
So, and you used to joke that you always let Willie open your shows and close your shows for you.
I tried to.
And but you got to sing on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry,
I think I did, yes.
and I guess you toured with Willie.
I've done a lot with him over the years,
Would ride on the buses with him, different
Yeah, I
places.
never got to ride on his bus, I don't think, because he, basically only he rides on his bus and his family. But, the others, they'd say, so-and-so, Judge is going to ride with us tonight. You go sleep on the, get in the back somewhere, sleep on the floor somewhere. The judge got to have your spot.
So after in 2006, I ran for your seat, and just came up short. Lost to Diane Turner, but we had joint goat roast for several years along that time, and we were having the goat roast over at our house on Battlefield Drive.
Yeah.
And then, so what'd you do after you stopped being a judge?
I don't know.
Well, do you remember through the American Bar Association? I believe
Oh, yeah.
you and Ann were at a convention one time, and y'all were thinking about what you wanted to do, and were considering the Peace Corps and some other things, and you
Yeah,
saw I believe you signed up.
Well, we just asked you about some more information about, going over and working in some of these other countries, over in the far countries. And I don't know whether they saw something in me or I saw something in them, but by the time we got back home to Nashville from wherever we'd been and, filled out this application, they had a thing from us wanting us to come to Washington and meet with them, which we did, and they said they were ready to take us, and we just loved it, and we stayed over there for.
You went to the Republic of Georgia,
Right.
which is a former part of the Soviet Union and
Right.
still battling Russia in some of the parts of the country.
Yeah.
And what did you do over there?
Dodged wallets for one thing. But I mean, seriously, they'd drop a bomb on us from time to time. Not that close, but we were serious about it.
So you were over there helping the lawyers in the courts?
Yeah, trying to train them, to let them know what real law and lawyers are, and it was not too easy.
Because I don't think they were kind of a brand new democracy.
Yeah, and they'd been trained by the Russians, and they didn't go to much trouble for taking care of people's rights.
So you were teaching them how we did it in the United States.
Yeah. And we had people from all over the world. I mean, there were, in a lot of different countries, and we would get in there and talk about it and figure it out. And, it really was nice for all of us.
And you got to do a bunch of traveling in Europe and Eastern Europe and all those.
We got somewhere. We were going to want. We were there. Where I was, eastern part of Russia, I guess. And anyway, we wanted to sign up to go into Russia. And they said, well, you have to go back to the U.S. to get you traveling things. We says, oh, we can't do that. We've got everything in order. And they says, got to be done there. We can't just let you come anywhere and sign up. So we never got to make that trip. And we'd already bought our trip and that kind of thing. So we ended up flying from where we were, which was early Eastern Europe, I guess. Anyway, to D.C., not to D.C., to up in somewhere. But we couldn't go on into there, so we got off the planes and got on and flew somewhere else,
And then me and Cindy came over there with our oldest son, Jackson. This was all in, what year would it have been, 2008?
Probably, yeah, I think so.
Or 2007. And we went to Spain, and then y'all came and met us. You and Ann came and met us in Spain, and then y'all flew with Jackson back to the Republic of Georgia, and we went off to Istanbul, Turkey, for a few nights on our own, and then we ultimately got to Georgia ourselves. And you were there a year, more or less. Is that right?
I thought it was longer than that, but it could have been just a year.
Okay. But at least a year. And now you also, your other jobs, I believe you started selling cars at some point.
Yeah, not serious, but just kind of, people used to come to me and want me to help them find a car. And one thing led to another. And, because I found out who I could trust in the car business. And so I'd go over and talk to them. Well, I ended up, they'd say, well, you bring so-and-so in, I'll pay you $50 or $100 or something. And, so that's how I would do that sometimes.
And anyway, you ultimately sold Lexuses.
Yeah, they were my favorite cars.
And you went through their training program and that sort of thing.
Yeah, at that time, I wasn't working at anything. So they hired me on and, paid me a little salary and that kind of thing. I mean, it was a real job.
And you also got to continue sitting as General Sessions Judge as a senior judge, or?
Yeah, I don't know how that worked when I was working at selling cars. That doesn't exactly rub the same way, but anyway, so I found, and I wasn't selling enough cars to have it make any difference, so I really quit doing that. And then I was back, if you call me and want me to help you find a car, I'd help you find one. And I still do that some. I mean, I had a woman call me a couple of months ago and say, she wanted this, that, or the other. And so we went, I took her out and I don't know whatever happened. I don't think I sold her one, but I took a shot at it.
I know you're a big sports fan. I know you always had University of Tennessee football tickets,
Yeah,
and
tried to.
we were original PSL holders for the Titans. We had Titans season tickets.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when the Sounds first came back to Nashville, when Larry Schmittou brought the Sounds to Nashville, we had the J.P. Brown seats at the Sound Stadium over, and then also you used to go to the Indianapolis 500 every year.
Yeah, been many times.
And I went with you many times, and I believe Uncle Billy W.O. also
Had a lot of
would go with you. So anyway, that was a lot of fun. I know you enjoyed that. We used to go up, if you recall, we used to go up and we'd go to Louisville and we'd go to Churchill Downs on Saturday before the race.
And then go up there.
And then spend the night. And I know JP went with us one year because I remember he hit the daily double or something and bought us all dinner. And then a couple of other stories about JP. I remember in 1979 when Tennessee was in the NCAA basketball tournament, and it was up in Murfreesboro.
Uh-huh.
And me and you and my mom and JP, and I don't know who else was with us, but we had tickets for the UT. And, of course, JP was always a big Vandy fan, right?
Yeah.
And so we're all sitting there, and we're like right next to the UT band, and they're playing Rocky Top and all this stuff. And JP looks down the row and says, "I think I've died and gone to hell." And then the other story was I believe it was 1978. Me, you, Mama, and JP went to the UT Vandy game in Knoxville. And, Tennessee would beat them every year almost, but every 7 or 8 years, Vandy would win one. Well, they beat us in 78. I think that's right. Or maybe it was 75. I can't remember, but you always told the story that we're driving home and JP's in the back raising hell because Vandy had beat Tennessee, and you threatened him that you were going to pull over and put him out of the car, and he was like, "Well, that's fine. I've got 10,000 Vandy fans will stop and pick me up and drive me back to Nashville." So
he almost got to find out for sure.
So what else? You have you're married to Ann Brown. She's from Kansas City.
Mm-hmm.
Your children are me. I'm John the third, but I go by Jack. Joan, and then Matt and Kevin are Ann's children.
Right.
And then your grandchildren. Joan has 3 children. Leah, Tad, and Audrey are your grandkids, and they all live out in California. Joan's lived out there a while. And then Jackson and Isaac are my children, and then Matt has a son, Mason, who actually lived with you and Ann and went to Father Ryan, and y'all helped raise him also. I remember one thing, when you first became a lawyer, sometime when you were practicing law, of course I was young at the time, but somehow you got somebody paid you with an interest in a drag strip. Do you remember that? And
Just barely. It taught me a great lesson, which was you don't take a fee into some other business. It just never works out.
I remember that. And then another thing I wanted to ask you about is I see you're wearing a bow tie today.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you wore one all while I was growing up, but sometime about 20 years ago or 15 years ago, you started wearing bow ties. And
I don't know, I wore them for years, and then I think I may have stopped or gone, whatever, and then I went back to them. But it's sort of my trademark now. I mean, it got so everybody was wearing them for a while, and that, so what? But now, when you're the only one, people remember.
So you brought the bow tie back, huh? So you've always been active in Calvary Methodist Church?
Well, always been active in Methodist Church. As a small kid, I went to East End Methodist, and then when we moved out on our side of town, we were actually in a smaller church, in Methodist Church there.
Glendale Methodist.
Glendale Methodist. And then, actually, when I married Lola Ann, she was already a member at Calvary. So that's where we kept our membership.
That's where y'all got married.
Yeah. And,
And
I've
then-
been there ever since. She left we got divorced at some point, and she changed to a different church.
Right.
I'm still there, so.
Well, I'm running out of questions, I think.
Well, I think your 30 minutes is about up.
I know you went to, you were part of the Sister City program through the National Bar Association and went to, I believe it's Cannes, France, or something.
Yeah.
1 year, I remember that. Oh, and another thing I wanted to mention was, I know you were an integral part when Metro just first started going to switching their courts over to the computer system, and y'all had the Justice Information System, or the JIS.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
I did a lot of things. Yeah, I did a lot for that, I think.
Y'all had a committee or something, I think, and you were part of that committee that when y'all first, I guess, were putting everything on computers. And that was when? In the 80s?
It was a long time ago. I can't tell you how long it's been. But, and it's still, I don't know, I think nowadays everybody's accepting that. But for years, nobody had any use for it. They thought, no, you write it in a big book, and that was how you did it. But they finally got over that.
And what'd you like about being a lawyer or a judge?
I think generally you could help people. Not every time, but you could try every time.
Any regrets you have?
Not off the top of my head. I'm sure I've got a bunch if I just think about them long enough.
Well, I guess that's it. I do remember one last story that I had a note here on was at some point you and my sister Joan and Roger, who was her husband, and Anne were at Versailles, which is King Louis XIV or whoever's summer home outside of Paris.
Yeah. And
somehow a bug flew in your mouth and you were choking to death. And then to fix it, you bought a whole ice cream cone and ate it all in one bite and washed the bug down. Do you remember that?
Actually, I don't. I don't know how I could forget it. But
anyway, they always told that story on you, but I thought that was a funny one.
That seems like a good story.
All right, so
we done?
I guess we're done.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't know how we finish, but
listen, world, we're through.